Hi, everybody. I am so excited to introduce Shane Jewell, who is the Executive Director of Oregon Ballet Theater. This is year 2 of Raising the Barre. Hey, Shane, thanks so much.
Hi, Liza. Thank you for having me. So great to be here.
Absolutely. So we have a rather grand title for our chat, Transparent Budgeting.
It's almost intimidating. Like, wow.
Let's see, Transparent Budgeting, a revolutionary approach to building trust and community, which I think is very exciting and is actually revolutionary in the ballet business. But I want to start with you and your extraordinarily diverse and fun background in the performing arts. Go.
Okay. Gosh. Well, let's see. It all began. No, honestly, it did begin when I was 6 years old. And I only bring that up because it's such an important moment in so many of our lives, is that for each of us, there is often that live in the arts and work in the arts, there's a show that we see
Yep.
when we are young that connects to us in some way. Mine was West Side Story. Arguably maybe 6 was too young for West Side Story, but my mother took me anyway. I
Okay.
leaned over halfway through and I said, I want to be part of this the rest of my life. And to this day, it has never changed. So that was my moment.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the magic happening on stage. I was moved and I just said, this is it. This is it for my life. I went into performing.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. And went to college on a musical theater scholarship. While I was in college, I took a job as a makeup artist at a salon, learning that side of things. And then right after college, started working for a company that presented national touring Broadway shows in 10 cities in the Midwest. So my first job was selling tickets over the phone. And in fact, my first week on the job was the first national tour of Lion King. And so this was back when we still sold most of our tickets over the phone.
Okay.
Which is not quite how it happens now.
Nope.
And I remember my first week, I sat down and they said, raise your hand if you have to use the restroom so someone can come take your phone and answer calls. And from there, I've just fell in love with the business side. I started selling program ads, started selling sponsorships. And then I also worked at a amusement park in Oklahoma called Frontier City, where I was a magician, did the magic show, and also did the Wild West stunt show. And I was the high jumper who jumped off of the second story building at the end of every performance after getting shot and throwing my shotgun.
And the hat goes, the black hat goes, and you.
That's right.
I have to ask, do you have any training for this, or were they just like, it's going to be fine, go ahead?
They brought in a stunt coordinator to train us on how to fall and how to roll and how to take punches. I wouldn't say it was a very thorough training, but as there were some scrapes and bruises as I learned along the way.
How old were you at this point?
At that point, it was while I was finishing college. So I was around 2021 at that time.
All right. So you were fully grown, but also stupid enough to think, this sounds like fun. I'm going to jump off.
Yeah, no problem. Then started working on the production side of theater and was a stage manager and company manager, toured for 2 years as a company manager, stage manager, and truck driver, which was an interesting combination of jobs. And we were doing a lot of one-nighters and a lot of time on the road. And
I bet you see the best and worst of people. And also it's talk about a way to get to know America, right?
It gave me such a great perspective of everything that goes into what we do.
Yep.
One of the things I'm most proud of is there's not a lot of jobs in this industry I haven't done at some point. And so when I approach anything with this organization, I can approach it with the empathy and the perspective of what those people on our teams are dealing with and their triumphs and challenges. And so I think it really helps build a foundation of trust.
100%. And you also mentioned, what was it, taped 15,000 renewal
Yeah, so we were doing season subscription renewals, and we had 15,000 season subscribers to our Broadway series, and we would tape every single renewal form to a seat per show. So 8 nights a week, I'd be at the theater in the early afternoon, taping every individual renewal seat. But in,
14,999,
that's right.
14,998.
That's right. And they were all specific to that seat and that subscriber. So I had to make sure
Oh,
that I had the
wow.
right person on the right
So
seat.
you actually had to pay attention while you were doing this. Did yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've literally done everything in the business, which I think is probably the best preparation. You told me you also called a show as a stage manager?
Yeah, I did. I called the show for 2 years, and by that point, I had almost memorized the show. But I had to learn so much about we were performing in different venues all the time, as opposed to sitting down with a crew of people that know a show. You're having to walk in with a crew that's never done this performance before. They get one run through, and then you go. And so, even though it was a show I called 1,000 times, I had to treat it like it was a show I was calling for the first time
Yep.
because every crew was brand new. Again, just helping with that perspective of what it takes to put on a show.
Yeah. And you're still in the business. You still love it, it sounds like. Uh,
There's nothing else I would rather do.
wow, that's unbelievable. Tell us about your first job running a classic music festival.
So, yeah, that was my first executive director position. I was 29 years old, and it was a beautiful organization called the OK Mozart International Music Festival based in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which used to be the headquarters of ConocoPhillips. And so they
Oh,
started this
okay.
festival.
Okay.
Yeah, and we brought in members of the New York Philharmonic. We had Joshua Bell, Itzhak Perlman,
Oh,
some incredible musicians come through. But I had never done much work in classical music. Musical theater had always been
yep.
my passion. And so coming in as an executive director, not really understanding the ins and outs of the art form, I believe put me at a great disadvantage. I have grown to see what an incredible advantage that actually does give you as an artistic director. So, case in point, I don't think that I would be a good executive director for a theater company because I feel very strongly about the art form of theater and musical theater. I was an actor, I was a tap dancer, a singer. I
Oh my
have very
goodness.
strong opinions.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I have very strong opinions about the art of musical
Yep.
theater.
Yep.
But as an executive director, that's not really your job. I realized that I was very passionate about musical theater because that's what I had done all my life. And as an executive director, being passionate about the art form doesn't always set you up for success on the
Yes.
executive side.
Yes.
And that is partly why I believe so strongly in the executive director and the artistic director leadership model for performing arts organizations, because it's not just about one perspective, it is the combination of perspectives. It's the combination of the artistic director holding the artistic integrity and at the highest standard and making sure that we are always pushing the envelope and making sure that our artists get what they want, and the executive director coming in with the business strategy and what has to happen from a sales perspective and what has to happen from an expense perspective. So, not one person should be able to hold both of those things. It is sometimes even within the conflict of those two different perspectives that you find the right answer. So, I really fell in love with learning, and by learning, asking all those questions of why. And as we always know, if the answer is it's because the way we've always done it, then maybe we need to think about that.
And there we go. And I think that that is the perfect bridge. As a sideline, one of my best interviews was with Victoria Morgan, who was both the artistic director and the CEO of the Cincinnati Ballet for a while. And she did it for a set period of time for a set purpose, which I thought was very smart. But she sort of talked about having these schizophrenic conversations in her head. As artistic director, she wants all the new costumes. She wants all the good stuff. And as executive director, she's also thinking, well, hang on a second, I've got a budget, et cetera. I do want to pursue, though, a little bit your both what you think the ideal relationship artistic executive director should be, why you don't think the CEO model is necessarily a good one, and also how coming in with sort of fresh eyes and constantly asking questions has really benefited you. So pick whichever one of those you want to go at first.
Okay, well, I'll start with, I think, the perfect relationship between executive and artistic director, first and foremost, is one of trust and mutual respect. Um, I believe there is no relationship more important than that one in a successful performing arts organization. And that does not mean that those two roles don't challenge each other, because I think they ought to challenge each other, consistently be challenging each other. But if it starts from a place of trust and mutual respect, and we know that while we may have different ways to get there, we ultimately are striving for the same thing, and as the success of this organization and our ability to serve our community. And so through the at times conflict of the two opinions is when you come to that great answer. But to be able to have conflict, you have to start with trust and mutual respect,
Yeah.
to understand that we have differing opinions. They're not personal attacks, they're here for the betterment of the organization. And we welcome the insight from not just the artistic and the executive director, but the teams and the donors and the board members, the audiences. We have to think about the fact that we serve a community and we lead that vision, but where do we get input? And then how do we then filter it as partners?
Yeah, you've already said a couple of magic phrases to me. I mean, I'm my friend Alan Harrison talks about the fact all the time that there is not a performing arts portion of the IRS code. It's scientific, it's educational, which means that what all of us are supposed to be doing is helping the communities in which we sit. And it does worry me when I see artistic directors, heads of museums, opera companies, et cetera, sort of, I think, speaking to their colleagues in Berlin or London or whatever and forgetting exactly where they are. And I definitely want to talk to you a little bit about that. I think in this case, having talked to your previous board chair, your current board chair, you and Danny are coming in at about the same time with, I think, a pretty clear mandate and a sort of an ethos of open communication and thoughtfulness, which really impressed me personally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really started even from the interview process. For both Danny and I, it was one of the most thorough and inclusive processes that we've ever been a part of. I got an opportunity to interview with almost every staff member, dancers, musicians. They got a chance to know who we were, and have a voice in whether or not they thought that we were the best leaders for the organization. So the board really set the tone coming in of, this is going to be an inclusive organization that expects and should expect roundtable leadership. And roundtable leadership is really creating an environment where people feel that their voices are not only heard but necessary. And there's a big difference in your voice is heard and your voice is necessary. Because your voice is heard is, if you decide to speak up, then we will listen to you. Your voice is necessary is, you have to speak up. We have to have your perspective, because it is the combined perspectives, again, that's going to get us there. Danny and I started from day one and just having very honest conversations with each other. Even when we were both interviewing, we were having conversations about how we feel about the art form personally and what we see is happening in the industry, and what steps can we take to change, to reform, what reform needs to be happen, how do we honor what should be honored and challenge what should be challenged, and deciphering between those two. And that really is how we started, and it is always built from there. We have such a great relationship and a great, again, foundation of trust, that we can have those tough conversations together.
And this is not a situation, and I've seen them go fairly well and go terribly wrong, where you have a longstanding executive director and the new artistic director comes in and is not read into the entire budget, which I find extraordinary. I mean, coming primarily from other not-for-profits, social services, et cetera, the idea that your artistic director wouldn't be able to see the budget to me is just appalling, but apparently it happens quite a bit. Or, the executive director has his or her own relationship with the board and then sort of filters that through to the artistic director. You all came in together, and interesting, you had conversations ahead of time. And clearly the board was very serious about promoting this as well. It wasn't, we've hired this superstar to push his vision and you are going to make it happen. He's got the glamour. You've got the, sweeping up the elephant poop, which is what I always think of with an executive director. The last person to leave, right? And like Sully, right? He's checking the plane to make sure everybody's off before he finally leaves. But you all are coming in this together with a shared understanding. And I think from the board, from what I gather, a real commitment to a reset to transparency, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, I think it starts with, I have a deep desire to support Danny. I think that Danny is one of the great storytellers of our generation, one of the great choreographers. And I believe in the work that she is creating and will create for this organization and for other organizations as well. But what I'm so excited about is what Danny can do with the full support of a professional company behind her, and ballets that she can create that are going to live on long before or long after her or I are here. And I think that's where it all starts. It starts with finding the artistic director that organizationally, this is the person that is going to help us grow into the next generation. And then how do we support that vision? So let her dream, because that's what she's supposed to be doing. And then we will work together to figure out which dreams can we make reality right now, and which dreams have to be part of a strategic plan that we build towards. But it's her dreams that we have to start with. And we are just so lucky to have Danny here because she's quite a dreamer.
Yeah. Super cool. So I can't wait to get out and see you all. I mean, I think you'll be my 25th listening tour. And as I've said, one of the great joys for me is actually going visiting companies and watching people do their thing. But it's fascinating to me because every single company has its own culture. And you can tell if there's happy companies, unhappy companies, very rigid companies, more loosey-goosey companies. And all of them have their own character, I think in part informed by the community in which they sit, if things are going well. I mean, Richmond, when I went to visit Stoner and Brett Bonner, I mean, just such like the walls. I always tell the story. Stoner took me on a tour and was opening up closet doors. And so I said, oh, I forgot that was there. Not Miss Fancy Pants, brilliant artistic vision, but also this is my building and I'm going to make sure that that mop is put away, which is kind of your ethos too, I think, which is, every single job. Don't be embarrassed to have done it. Celebrate having done it. How do you balance operationalizing everybody having a say, everybody feeling heard, and still getting stuff done? Or do they have to be in conflict?
Well, that's a great question, and one I don't think that I have completely figured the answer out to. I have really made it such a priority for me to have an open door policy, to be able to be available for everyone all the time. And the challenge that creates is how do you also focus on the things that you need to focus on and not be there to react to what everyone needs you for at any given moment.
Yep.
And it's still a balance. It is. I once had an executive coach that told me, if you don't own your calendar will own you.
Yes.
And so, every Monday morning, my first thing I do is I write down my 6 most important things for the week. And then I put those things in my calendar of when I'm going to work on them. And then inevitably something happens that week and I can't get to all of them and have to push them the next week.
Yep.
But you never stop working. You never stop trying. But you also have to build in time to be there for your teams.
And when you told me that, that's when I said, oh my God, I got to interview this guy, because it is such a radical departure from the closed door and the hushed tones and the, the grates are up on the fifth floor, whatever floor they're on. The idea, it is revolutionary that you would open the door, that you would have office hours. And you mentioned helping dancers with contract provisions, et cetera. Whereas, in the past, I mean, from stories I've heard, it's, first of all, if you have to work for somebody else, we don't want to know about it, even though that's ridiculous. But also, we're doing the important work here. How dare you come in and bother us? I found that extraordinary and empowering. And in my sort of Pollyannish way, I think that's going to make everybody smarter and make the field better, right? But there is this strain in the ballet world of, if you give people, particularly women, any information at all, it gives them power. They might push back. They might ask for change, right?
Well, if that is true, then we need to do more of it. I mean, in all honesty, I think that when you look at the reforms and changes that have happened in the ballet world in recent years, and we still have a long way to go, but it's because ballet companies were called out. It's because someone said, this isn't going. It's because Dancer Data Project. It's because these other organizations called out what was happening in the ballet world, and we had to respond, and we should respond. There is this tendency, and I think it's because of just the nonprofit status and the reliance that we always have on contributed income. But we always want to paint this picture like everything is beautiful at the ballet, and we never
Yes.
have any problems, and
Yes.
there's never any. Don't worry, everything is perfect, and that's just not true.
Yes.
And if we're going to be transparent, we have to be transparent not just about our successes, but about our challenges as well. And sometimes we need outside people to point out areas that we may have forgotten, or that we may have been doing things always the same way over and over for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not seeing it as a problem. And sometimes it takes an outside person saying, hey, there's a problem, before we go, oh, wow, we need to really look at that. What an issue.
Could not agree more. Just did a fabulous session with Ann Kavanaugh on media training. And, if you don't talk about your problems in advance, then you can't train to address them. If you just go, barricade the doors, don't let anybody through, deny, it's all going to be fine. It's probably not. I'm having done some philanthropy in other areas and looked at what social service is doing and how they measure success, et cetera. I have been moved to say that in some case, I truly believe that the ballet world had its last best idea somewhere in the 1990s. And
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be an open discussion of sort of fundamental problems, whether they're economic or failure to represent your communities on stage. And if you don't have an honest discussion about it, how are you going to fix it? What is it? Half the ballet audiences have disappeared in the last 20, 25 years, and they're getting older. You can't keep sort of humming that things are great, right, without talking about this stuff. But somehow, I don't know, that translates as threatening. How do you bring your community in your doors, though, right? I mean, clearly you're doing it as part of the culture of the company. How do you turn that outward to the community? And I mean, do you do listening tours? Is it in the programming? How are you focusing on that?
Well, you bring up listening tours, and I gotta say, that's such an important place to start. At the end of the day, a ballet's company is to serve the community in which it lives. And that's what we do.
Amen, brother.
We are here to serve. And how can we serve a community without knowing what it is they want, without knowing how it is they want to be served? I feel like we're in this juxtaposition right now, the ballet world, of a crisis of who we want to be, who our audiences want us to be, and what our finances dictate we be.
Yep.
And finding out through all of those, where is the right answer? Where is the path forward? Because there's so much mission work that organizations are wanting to do and trying to do, and there's so much diversification of our artists, of our choreographers, of our leaders, of our staff, of our audiences that
Yep.
is critical. And there's also this real challenge of ballet companies trying to um, understand what post-pandemic audiences and students and communities are looking for
Yep.
from their arts organizations and from their ballet companies. So it's about creating a new vision, but what voices and input and opinions are helping to form that vision? And I think in the past, those visions have been made by very small groups of people, and it has been decided for the community how they will be served.
Yep.
And I think that we have to switch that, and we have to open that door and say, "We're here to serve you. How would you like us to do that?"
And I'm always fascinated because there seems to be this sort of dichotomy and or fear. Well, we represent, our mission is excellence in ballet, which by the way, doesn't necessarily, what is excellence and how does that serve your community? But if we push excellence too far, that means we can't have a diverse dancer population. We can't have new stories. We can't bring new voices onto the stage because somehow that will diminish excellence, which is a very restrictive view of and retrograde view of what excellence is. I mean, watching Azure Barton in Busk, watching Michelle Dorrance bringing in tap, the amount of watch Camille Brown in Fire Shut Up in My Bones bringing step into the opera, or Akram Khan's Giselle. To me, that's in that space is where the really fun, interesting stuff is going on. And it doesn't mean you can't do a wonderful, Giselle, Swan Lake, whatever it is. But it's not, organizations that are stressed financially very often say, well, we'll get to that later. Right now, we just need to open the stage. And because we need to bring in a blockbuster, of course, we've got to have another white male that, one of 5 or 6 names that you and I can both name, because we need a blockbuster. We need to make certain we're going to bring people in. And we'll get to that other stuff later. How do you respond to that?
Well, there are so many different ways to approach that. Um, First and foremost, I would say that as an art form, as an industry, we have to always understand that we are fighting against hundreds of years of elitism in our art form. We are actively fighting against that. So, using words like excellence in ballet um, can lead us in a direction where we are still emphasizing that this is only for a specific group of people
Very
that can do a specific thing. We will always be able to provide excellence in whatever we do, whether that is a contemporary dance class for adults or whether that is Swan Lake. But there's a difference between excellence and elitism. And there's a difference. You can do something excellent and it still be accessible. So I think right now, programmatically, we do have to look at what our audiences are wanting, but we also have to look at what's happening in the industry. What do we need our audiences to know about dance? Because they often get their, what they see from the dance community and from the dance industry is often from what we put on the stage.
Yep.
So we have to understand that we are a voice for them of what's happening within the industry and what we're representing in the industry. So it's always about finding that balance. Now, some of the challenges that you find with those desire for, oh, we need to do this blockbuster because it's going to bring in X amount of dollars. And that's absolutely true. There are times that you have to do shows that are going to bring in ticket sales that you need. And the vast majority of those shows, there you have to balance between, am I going to build something new or am I going to rent something that's already created? And there is financial ramifications to both of those decisions. And so you then have to balance your mission on where is our priorities and where are our values. Organizations can talk all they want about where their values are, but their true values can be found in their financials.
Interesting.
Because that's where they're investing their money.
Like, where are you investing your money? I'm not going to ask you to get too specific, but as specific as you can be. why'd you take the job? And I know it's got to have something to do with the role that the board of directors played in your interview process. And, you've been around the block on so many of these. What were you looking for from the board of directors that made you say, yes, this is a good fit for me? And yes, I think I can be of service and bring change here.
When I looked at Oregon Ballet Theater, I saw a company that was so invested in its future that it was willing to do the difficult work with the board, to do the difficult governance work, to get a board that is highly engaged, to bring in brand new leadership. It is so rare for a ballet company to bring in an AD and ED at the same time.
Yep.
And so many of our colleagues, and I don't mean just ballet, I mean performing arts in general, have just been trying so desperately to hold on to the status quo. How do we get back?
Yep.
How do we get back to pre-pandemic audiences?
As if it was nirvana and perfect and there were no problems.
Because it wasn't.
Nope.
It wasn't nirvana. And I was really not interested in being part of an organization that was trying to get to a status quo that may or may not exist anymore. What I was interested in is an organization that was looking to bring in new leadership that says, we might need to do things differently. If you look at Portland in and of itself, Portland has also had a lot of challenges in the pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yep.
And so we're not only holding what do we create as the new vision for Oregon Ballet Theater just as an organization. There's also a role that we play in the revitalization of Portland and what Portland is going to look like in the future, and specifically what downtowns all over the country are going through right now.
Yep. San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it's not going to be employees coming back to work that brings about the change in downtowns. What's going to bring people back to downtown is the role of the arts and culture organizations. And so not only do we have to balance what we do in just the day in and day out for OBT, but what that does for this community and for the future. And I think that ballet as a whole has to look at every aspect of what we do. We can't take anything for granted right now. And much like I did when I was 29 at a classical music festival where I knew very little about the art form, I asked why about everything. And those answers, the answers to that why that's what we have to have publicly. That's what we have to have with leadership teams, with staff, with board members. We need more opinions to help inform how we move forward than me and Danny saying we have all the answers.
So last question, how do you operationalize that? How do you show your community you're willing to hear? How do you go out and ask questions? And how do you let your audiences, your public, know where you're at?
Right. Well, first you have to start internally. First, you have to start with your teams. You have to make sure that your staff has input on what's happening. Our leadership team meets on a regular basis, not to talk about what we're doing in our individual departments, but to talk about what's happening in the organization as a whole.
Okay.
We built out budgets going to FY27 to show our board, to show our staff, here's our path forward. Here are the main drivers of what's happening. And now, again, I'm just talking from the business perspective, not the artistic as much. So you get your teams and you get their input and you get their, you make sure that they fully understand and are on board with where we're going as a company. But then you have to go old school. You have to do town hall meetings. You have to do surveys. You have to bring in stakeholders. And when people bring in stakeholders, sometimes they mean, I'm going to bring in our largest donors.
Yep, that's usually what it means.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
One of the things that we're really trying to push here is an understanding of what it means to donate. There are people that could give us $50,000 a year, and it's the same as me giving you $1.
Right.
to them. There are other people that give us $500 a year, and that means a lot to them.
Yep.
And sometimes it's a struggle to make sure that they can make that donation, but they're going to do it because they care so much about OBT. So if we just look at the numbers, then we might end up falling into that pattern of we're just going to talk to our biggest donors. But we don't want to do that. Every donation is important. Every ticket buy purchase is important. Every class you sign up for the school is important, and your voice should be heard. So we're trying to balance like electronic surveys, in-person town halls. Danny and I said when we first got here, we're on a listening campaign, and we've now almost been here a year, and that campaign has not stopped. And if anything, it's just gotten more momentum.
Yep. That totally makes sense to me. What should we look for from you and Danny in the next year or so? And part of what I'm going to ask you is how you're going to define success.
I
know, right?
What should you? Yeah, boy, that's a tough question. One of the things that I think you should look for from OBT and from Danny and me is getting to see Danny's artistic vision coming to fruition at this organization, and an emphasis on creating new works. As an industry, we always have to keep creating, and there are inherent financial challenges to it, but it doesn't mean that we can stop, because if we don't evolve, then we cease to exist. I would say that what success looks like in these first years with Danny and me is another challenge that we sometimes have in the ballet world, or just in the nonprofit world in general, is this desire, this almost need for we have to grow. We have to be growing all the time, all the time. And that's not always balanced by financially where you are as an organization, or where you are as an industry, or where you are in your community.
Yep.
So this is a moment for us to start with a foundation. Danny and I are here to play a long game. And so we want to make sure that we build a solid foundation. So what that looks like to me, what success looks like in the next year or so with OBT, is starting by making OBT one of the best places to work we can absolutely make it.
Wow.
When your teams, when your artists, when your board, when they feel invested in, when your teams feel cared about, when you take a moment to say to a dancer, hey, let's talk about that contract for something you're going to do over the summer, because I want to make sure that you're protected, and I want to make sure that your interests are out there, then you're saying, I care about you. I don't care about you just for what you do on stage. I care about you as an individual and as a part of this organization. And if everyone here feels that, it builds a loyalty, it builds a trust, and that has to be where we start from. And everything else will go from there. There's so many things I could list.
What
that are
a
success,
brilliant
but it
definition
starts
of
there.
success. And I think that may be the first time I know of two other leaders in the ballet world that have said similar things to me. So, I mean, what a brilliant definition of success. And yes, what a foundation, right?
Yeah.
Shane, Jewell, I wish we could talk all day. Unfortunately, we
Me
can't.
too.
Thank you so much. What a treat. I can't wait to come out and see you all, see what you're building.
Thank you. It was truly a pleasure. And thank you for all the work you've done in this industry. It really has been such a game changer and so needed. So thank you for that.